So the project begins. Remove the upper plenum of the motor, basically the same place I was at before. There it is right there. It comes off in about 10 minutes. Couple vacuum lines, plugs, 7 screws. It's a dry intake. There's no coolant that runs through it. It's plastic. It seals up with some O-rings, which you saw over there. Here is the reason for the season here. This is the new Doorman replacement. Sold by Napa, but it's a Doorman part number. Cast aluminum oil cooler that will go in here. That's the lid. So this is all you see sticking up. Next thing I'm going to be doing is pulling the lower intake manifold once I get some electrical stuff out of the way, and then we'll have access to it. Okay, here we are. Took about an hour and a little finagling, and I had to get one extra bracket off. Never taken the top of one of these apart. I was a little unclear on how many pieces had to come out of the way. Some guys will tell you they unplug the coil packs and they take this whole harness off with the manifold. I went in and just undid the injectors, pulled back that little red locking tab, compressed the little black button, and got these off. They came off okay. Some of them were a little stubborn. Of course, there's 3 on this side, there's 3 on this side, and then really it was just a matter of, I think, 6 screws, 7 screws that hold the lower intake on. But gives you ready access to the oil cooler, which is the assembly right here. And I don't know if you can see down in there. You can see some oil down in there. Not leaking as bad as I had thought. If you look in the back here, there is some oil staining down in the valley. So I'm gonna pull this oil cooler out. There's 2 switches on it, one for the oil temperature and one for oil pressure. And there's a coolant hose on the bottom. So I'm gonna pull that off. It looks like you can undo the screws, lift the cooler up out of there, and then get to the hose and the other connector. So I'm gonna give that a shot now. Okay, so the oil cooler is out. Pretty easy to get out of there. I think there's 5 screws. It sits down on here. Here's all the, well, you can't see it. Let me point to it. So all the ports that it connects to are here. Coolant, oil. I guess these 2 are coolant. These 2 are probably oil. Anyway, you can see in the valley how, now some of this came out of the cooler when I took it off, but it'll fill up this cavity here. These are NOx sensors, this one and this one. But eventually it'll fill up this cavity and it'll run over the back and down. Now I just washed all this out, so I suspect this was filling up again. I never realized how deep this cavity is, but you can see I lose the blade of a screwdriver. So I'm gonna vacuum out all this crap down here and clean this all out real good. And there's just a bunch of dirt and stuff in there, which I don't care if that stays. I'll get that all cleaned up, and then we'll swap the oil cooler over to the new base housing and get it all back together. Here's the old one, by the way. This is what I just took out. And hard to say where the leak comes from on these things. Those 2 plugs on the front are a good source for leaks. Maybe mine was leaking. There's also one on the side. Hard to say. But the kit comes with all new upper and lower intake O-rings, all new oil cooler O-rings. So what I have to switch over from this one to this one are the temp sensor and the oil pressure switch and the oil cooler. So I'll get to that in a few minutes. Take it off, clean everything up, put it on the new one. I already swapped over the filter and the cap. I just changed the oil in this thing about 3 weeks ago, so I'm not worried about putting a new filter in it right now. Thing was spotless. All right, we'll come back to you in a few minutes. All right. So got it all cleaned up in there, pretty good. There's a little bit of crap down in the bottom still, but not worried about that. Took a Scotch-Brite pad and cleaned off the aluminum portion of the lower intake, and also all of the round openings where the new cooler seals. Was able to use a small end on my shop vac and sucked out all the coolant and oil, whatever was down in there. Washed it all down with brake cleaner. And now I'm getting ready to separate the oil cooler, put it on the new housing, and start putting it all back together. All right, happened to turn around from cleaning up parts, and look what I found on top of the engine. I don't know where that came from. It just happened to be sitting there. All right, so if that's the case, we will have to take care of a little bit of that. Cheers to you, my brother. All right, here we go. There's the new oil cooler installed. The temperature switch, pressure switch are both in. Torque to 177 inch-pounds. Now I've got the new cooler on there. And those screws are supposed to be tightened to 35 inch-pounds, which is not a lot. You can see if you watch the dial. I'm gonna up that just a little bit to 50 because it's easier to read. And you can hardly tell the difference from 35 inch-pounds, not foot-pounds, inch-pounds to 50. Anyway, I'm gonna go through and torque all those in a nice crisscross pattern. Make sure this is down tight. And then this will be ready to go back into the motor. There is an O-ring, get the camera right, O-ring that has to go on this fitting, and this pushes down into a boss in the front of the motor, into a hole. And then there's 3 or 4 others on the bottom that just press into this piece. And here, I might as well show you now. So you can see the 1, 2, 3, 4, and there's new O-rings that go in there. And I'll put a little bit of, probably just a little light chassis grease on there. That'll kind of hold them. I don't know how well they stick into those grooves. But also, back to it. For ease of tightening all this stuff, this is barely clamped in the vise. It's just basically sitting in there. And oh, look at that. That looks like a problem. Well, I'll take care of that too. Okay, just a horizontal filming update. Dawned on me, I wanted to point out a couple things from the old intake or the old oil cooler. When I swapped the sensors over, they had these brass inserts here, the pipe thread. So I use Mega Lock, little pipe thread sealant on the new ones. Put them into the new aluminum housing. They get torqued to 177 inch-pounds. I also used a drop of blue Loctite on all the bolts. The bolts get torqued to, I believe, 35 inch-pounds perhaps. All the numbers were in the directions with the kit. So there's the new housing in the motor. Those sensors are back here. The coolant line is down there. That's all hooked up. So I'm just prepping the intake to go back on. Here's just a little note on the intake. This is the top side of it right here. Comes with all these new O-rings. So these are super easy to change. You don't necessarily have to always change these when you separate the two. These are in fine shape. All you do is there's a little notch here actually that makes it easy. Just pick it with a little pick. Easier with 2 hands. Pull the old ones out. Pop the new ones in. Press them right down in there. Do that 6 times. The bolts on these are captured in the plastic. They will come out if you unscrew them. You can screw them up out the top and take them out, but you don't need to. They're captured. One other thing of interest is, note the heads on these screws. They're E-Torx, or external Torx. So they look like, the heads look like a Torx bit. I don't know what size these are. I have a whole bunch of E-Torx bits. Can't read the size on them anymore. The new oil cooler assembly filter mount comes with new bolts. Same thing. I put a little drop of Loctite on them. They get torqued down. Those are the ones that I just showed you in there. And that's that. Manifold. Same thing. We hold this upside down. The bolts stay in. Same on the bottom. Pop out the old ones. These are fine, but we're gonna pop them out, clean them up, and replace them anyway. Okay, that is all. All right, she's back up and running. Motor's all back together. Wasn't bad going back together. No lights, no codes. Appears to be no oil leak. I'm just warming her up right now, topping off the coolant. Using all new, I don't know, extended life red coolant. Anyway, we'll post some more if anything happens, but I'm gonna call this job complete.